Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to our witnesses. Thank you for your service, and especially General Davis, we wish you well in your retirement. It's been a pleasure to work with you. The budget request for Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps programs in our jurisdiction reflects a more stable funding path for major aviation programs and seeks to address modernization upgrades needed by all three services. This committee has rightfully focused on areas where improvements are needed in the acquisition process, but there are a number of successes that don't get much attention, but promise to deliver greatly improved capabilities in some key areas in the next few years for the services. Our witnesses today and the thousands of people that work in acquisition for the services should be commended for that. That being said, there are areas of concern with some of the programs being reviewed by the subcommittee today, and it is our responsibility to make sure our service members get the best possible equipment and to see that taxpayer funds are wisely spent. Today's hearing will have to cover a lot of ground, but I wanted to make two quick points prior to our hearing from our witnesses. The first is my continued concern with the rate of physiological events plaguing the Navy's aviation community in the FA-18 Hornet and T-45 trainer aircraft fleets. While I know the Navy is working hard and looking at lots of options in this area, the rates remain at a very high rate in some cases, and in the case of the T-45C, the Navy hasn't been able to conduct student pilot flights since early April, a more than 2-month pause in critical training for our future aviators. I look forward to getting an update on the issue and to hearing about how the several efforts underway are addressing the problem. I also have some questions about areas for Air Force and Navy collaboration to solve these issues. My second concern is with the significant cost growth reflected in the budget request for several important programs for each of the services. In each case, there are significant increases compared to last year's projections for fiscal year 18. The programs in question include, one, the Air Force's Next Generation Air Dominance Program, which shows a significant increase from $21 million in fiscal year 17 to $294 million in fiscal year 18. Second, the Navy's Next Generation Jammer Program, which shows an $89 million increase in fiscal year 18. The F-35 program that shows a $500 million increase in fiscal year 18 to finish development, and the CH-53K program that shows a $107 million increase in fiscal year 18. All of these are very important programs, so I'd like to fully understand the reasons for the proposed growth as part of the subcommittee's review of the fiscal year 18 budget. And with that, I yield back. Thank you. I appreciate in your testimony, Admiral Grosskreutz, that you mentioned the efforts you're putting into addressing the physiological episodes. But as of today, it has been 2 months since normal training operations using the T-45 trainer aircraft were underway at Kingsville Meridian and Pensacola Naval Air Stations. So this is clearly a major problem for the Navy, and the long-term impact will certainly be more pronounced the longer issues with the trainers persist. So without a reliable flow of new pilots and naval flight officers, the Navy will be in serious trouble from a personnel standpoint in the future. So in that regard, I have two questions about possible ways forward. First, assuming this problem continues for some time, are there non-T-45 aircraft options for getting this training accomplished? If so, what are they? Can Air Force aircraft be used for at least some of the training syllabus? And can the training with the T-45 be cut back and then made up later in an aviator's career? So that's one. Second, several of the aviators our staff spoke with asked the Navy to take a serious look at changing at least some T-45 aircraft back to a liquid oxygen-based system for providing breathing air to the crew. And they pointed out that the original British version of the aircraft did use such a system. So is the Navy looking at this option for T-45s? How might this time and what might the time and cost be for doing that? And how can we in Congress help make sure this gets a serious look and testing in the near future? So a lot for a very short time.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Let me start with the second question first on locks. We are pursuing locks as a potential solution to the problem. Today we've got kind of a two-pronged approach. One is to try and identify root cause and then take corrective actions. The other is looking at alerting and protection measures so we can get the T-45s back in the air for flight training. And we're doing those two things in parallel. One is not waiting for the other. LOX is quite honestly, a longer-term solution. We are trying to come up with alert and protection methodologies that would get our students back in the aircraft in the near term. We're talking weeks instead of months that we would be looking at trying to put LOX in that aircraft. But we're still pursuing that as an alternative. Given the constraints, I won't talk about the alert and protection devices that we are looking at putting in the aircraft in the near term unless you want to follow up with that. In regards to T-45s and doing the training in other aircraft, we have looked and are continuing to look as this continues to stretch whether or not there are things we can push to the next stage of training in the fleet readiness squadrons. We prefer not to do that, obviously, because it costs more in those fleet jets. We're having our own readiness issues with those fleet aircraft, so putting more workload, more burden of hours in those squadrons is, I won't say last resort, but it's not something we want to pursue unless we absolutely have to. We have considered using other aircraft, potentially Air Force. I don't think we've talked to the Air Force about that, but one of the key things that we get out of T-45 training is taking our new aviators, our new student naval aviators, to the ship. Which we can only do right now in the T-45 or in their next fleet aircraft. One of the challenges is determining what their next fleet aircraft is as they're going through the training syllabus. So we'd have to make those decisions before they completed their normal syllabus.
Admiral, we need you to conclude.
Training. So yes, ma'am, we're looking at all those options, including LOX, but again, we're more focused right now on trying to get the T-45s back in the air with alert and protection measures for our student naval aviators.
Thank you.
Mr.